Bambu Lab print issues, the 3D print general's getting some wiggles, and Ender 3 that's having a couple of issues, and the final update on my Bambu Lab X1 Carbon before my 6-month video comes out next week. All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 95. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, maybe you're struggling with some 3D print failures, make sure to leave a like and get subscribed. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps the channel out immensely. We are taking fan submissions, so if you are dealing with some print failures and you would like us to take a look at them, you can do so by tagging us on the social medias, emailing me directly, youtube@3dmusketeers.com, or if you're feeling a little zesty, you can slide into those DMs if that's your kind of thing as well. Got some interesting fails for you this week, as well as the final update before the 6-month video of my Bambu Lab X1 Carbon and my overall experiences with it. I think you guys will enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it and you want to support the channel, you can do so via Patreon, YouTube channel members, and now PayPal. Links, of course, are in that description down below, with the $10 tier and higher getting you access to our private Discord, where we work on things like custom merch. It's going to be released here shortly, as well as updates on The Politician, which I don't talk too much publicly about, and if you don't know what it is, come over and hang out in the Discord. I think you're going to enjoy it. But let's start off with an interesting Bambu fail, with a much easier solution than you might think. How do I fix my benchy? Print made with eSun Matte PLA on Bambu Lab X1 Carbon with default settings for Bambu Matte PLA in standard mode. Well, this is not Bambu PLA. Let's take a look at Bambu Studio and understand it. So they are slicing for Bambu Lab PLA, specifically the PLA matte. Bambu Lab puts something special into their filament. They don't tell you what it is. Even if you read the MSDS, it's proprietary. But we can see that if we use Bambu Matte PLA, which is stock settings on everything else, 0.2mm standard, and I'm just slicing with the high temp plate because it's easiest, we can see that a benchy takes 40 minutes and 14 seconds. If we go over to regular generic PLA, which with a Bambu, if you're not using Bambu Lab material, you'll want to make sure that you pick generic. I know that because you have matte material, this might not seem like a big deal, but there you go. It is a almost 9-minute longer print just by going with regular PLA. So what's the big difference? All I'm doing is changing the filament settings. So what's the issue? With Bambu Lab PLA matte, we can see that the max volumetric speed is capped at 22 cubic millimeters per second. But if we go to the generic profile, which if you're running generic material, probably a good idea to run the generic profiles, we can see that it is capped at 12 cubic millimeters a second. Now, on a benchy, that's not going to matter too much, but on really big prints, you're going to notice a significant decrease in time. And remember, 8 to 9 minutes on a 40-minute print is quite a bit of time. It's 20%. But their issue is not exactly flow, although some of it is flow. It is cooling. We can see that the printer is moving so fast that it's not taking enough time to cool everything down. And while these photos might be a little bit fuzzy, we can see the front of the bow of the benchy doesn't look great. I would start with putting the printer on the correct settings. That would be the generic PLA, and I recognize that it is matte, but still, the generic PLA should be fine. If you are going to run Bambu Lab material, then you can run Bambu Lab profiles. They have special sauce in their plastic, and I haven't yet figured out what it is, and I lost my connection with the laser mass spectrometer. So if any of you have a mass spectrometer and want to help me figure out what 11 herbs and spices they put into the filament, I'd love to know, because it's kind of interesting to me. Big thing to do is just go ahead and slow it down by putting it with the generic profiles. That would be a good place to start. The next thing that you can do is make sure that the bow of the benchy is facing the auxiliary fan. On the Bambu, when you're opening it and looking at it from the inside, the auxiliary fan should be off to your left-hand side. You should be facing the bow of the benchy toward that. The auxiliary fan blows air across the part, but it really only cools the front of the part. Obviously, it's not going to cool too much on the backside. This assists the machine in running as fast as it can. And, well, with regular PLA, moving that fast, it's not going to cool it fast enough. And you're probably not running enough temperature. We can see some other issues that are indicative of rough cooling, although hilariously, the smokestack looks pretty darn good, all things considered, so certainly some things are right. I would start with running the generic profile and see how that works for you. Issues at the start of each layer at the seam. So we've got a part here, actually looks pretty good. I don't mind the part, like the quality is okay, but we definitely have some issues with our retraction. They properly identify that this is occurring at the beginning of each line rather than at the end. That is a great thing to note when you are looking at your Z-seam as well as your retraction and de-retraction. In a case like this, you do definitely want to make sure that you are doing the appropriate amount of retraction and de-retraction. It is an SV06 super slicer clipper 0.6 nozzle. This baby's had a couple of upgrades. So we've got a couple of things to look at. If this was a Bowden printer, I would say it's ramming settings, but because it's not a Bowden printer, I have reason to believe that this is just a linear advance or pressure advance problem, which is somewhat of the same thing at the end of the day. What is going on is you are likely trying to print so bloody fast that the machine is not able to properly heat that material before it comes out of the nozzle. So let's slow it down. The other thing, 230 to 235 for PETG with a 0.6 nozzle is really low temp. The only reason you'd be running those low temps is if you're running a nozzle that does for some reason have high thermal transfer, like a Diamondback. Well, not today's sponsor. Links, of course, are in that description down below. I would look at making sure that your temperatures are set appropriately first. We can see the white is the PETG, and we certainly have some ringing going on here. So input shaping might be in your future, especially if you're using clipper. But it also appears that you have a setting turned on where you are retracting every layer. You don't need to do that. And that might go ahead and reduce that visible Z-seam. When playing with Pressure Advance inside of Super Slicer, and personally, I would not play with it inside of Super Slicer. One, Super Slicer has a lot of options, and you can play down this road of option gala until you run out of options and you still don't know what the actual problem was. I would go over to Prusa Slicer for a little bit. Not only is it fully up to date, where Super Slicer normally runs a couple of revisions behind, it has a wonderful pressure tuning algorithm. With that being said, if you are getting some benefit of Super Slicer that you don't get in other slicers, go ahead and use it. I looked at Super Slicer a while back. We'll card to our most recent video so you guys can take a look on it. While it is a little bit of an older video, it still likely checks out quite well. In a case like this, you can look at your retraction, de-retraction settings. It looks like you might not be de-retracting enough, and you're not getting that filament right close to the hot end. I'd be curious to see if this only happens at the exterior perimeter, or if you can see this on infill in other areas when the print is rolling. Pressure Advance is likely one of the best places to start immediately because it's probably your issue. But retraction, de-retraction are not a bad place to go either. And we can see that they have been messing around with linear advance, and speed does have some effect, but not a ton. Linear advance is not just 100% speed and adjusted linear advance, 50% speed adjusted linear advance. It takes a little bit to tune it in. I recognize that it's not an overnight thing, but if you are going to try to run for speed, you gotta kind of do that stuff. If you are going to run this fast, and they are running pretty fast, 150 millimeters per second for perimeters and 80 millimeters a second for external, you can't be running materials as cold as you are. You gotta turn up the temps, because realistically, that 0.6 nozzle is not heating up the filament enough, and I think that's why we see the kind of banding that we see on the lines themselves. That's the material not being properly heated. I'd like to see some higher heat. I'd like to see tuning that pressure advance and linear advance a little bit more as well, and who knows, maybe it'll get a solution. Next up, a fail from the 3D Print General, who appears to be running some sort of Flash Forge printer. Unfortunately, I don't know what it is just by looking at it, but I'm sure it's a relatively new one. He says something seems off, and yeah, I would agree. The first thing here is check your belts and grub screws. This belt does not appear very tight, or it's not cut straight. I'm not exactly certain which it is. If it is loose, you could certainly see these issues that you're seeing right here. The other thing that this could be is that the grub screws are loose. And the fact that it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth tells me it's probably more related to a grub screw. On printers that move fast, you gotta be careful with it. I just wish I knew more about the printer itself. We can see as the print goes on, it is definitely a big issue. It's time to cancel that print. Look at those belts, look at those grub screws, and see. It does have a tensioner over here on the left side of the printer, so that is a big benefit as well. Definitely appreciate that. Can't see anything on the right side, but I'm going to assume all the tensioning is done on the left. Warning, this one is a little graphic. There's no photos, but the description is kind of graphic. So if that's not your kind of thing, skip to this time code. I am an idiot, says my comment section, and I was very lax on my PPE when washing and handling my resin prints. It's been a while. You know what's coming. Resin is toxic. 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 And before some of you people say, well, resin's not technically toxic. Yeah, okay, technically it might not be. But this is bad news, bears. I was fishing my parts out of the IPA cleaning vat without gloves, and over the last week, I've developed a rash on the backs and sides of my hands. Each hair follicle is a hard raised bump, and it burns and itches at the same time. My skin feels like alligator skin. I am applying cortisone cream several times a day. This has gone on for 3 to 4 days now. How long until these things start to heal? I know it was a stupid mistake, and I will never make it again. Respect the resin. I like that. Respect the resin. The top comment kind of illustrates it here. If you're gonna be dumb, you gotta be tough. For those that don't know what's going on here, those bumps are likely trapped oil and whatever it be underneath the dermis, underneath your skin. That is bad. We've talked about this so many times, and still people don't listen. Resin is going to hurt you. If it doesn't hurt you now, getting exposed to it over time will cause issues. And I'm betting the first time they did this, nothing happened. And so they said, it must be fine. So they kept doing it. I don't want to poke fun at people that are going through problems. Obviously, the solution is don't do this. We're a little bit past that now. So let's talk about what to do. I'm gonna hedge a bet and say that you're in the United States, so you might not be able to afford medical care. Hooray. In that case, you kind of have to leave it alone. You want to make sure that you wash your hands and wash your hands good. A degreaser is going to help, but make sure it's not one that has any grit in it. Dawn dish soap is a great place to start because it doesn't have any grit. I know for me, when I work on stuff and I get all oily and greasy, I always reach for that orange scrub stuff that you always find in mechanic shops because it does a great job of getting rid of grime on your hands. But we don't want to irritate the skin more than it's already irritated. It's been through enough. Trust me. We don't know how long it's going to take for it to heal. Your exposure will generally dictate how long it will take to heal, as well as how sensitive you are to it. Best thing you can do right now is get the chemicals away. If you still have IPA with resin in it, you need to get it out of where you're living. I don't care if you put it outside to let it cure or you put it into a garage, leave it alone. Do not pour it down the drain. Resin is toxic, for the love of God. Resin is toxic. Please don't pour it down the drain. I don't care if it's water washable resin. Don't pour it down the drain. You don't want to poison waterways. Please don't do that. But the best thing that you can do is cortisone cream, maybe some Benadryl. This isn't medical advice. If you have good health insurance, go talk to a doctor. Let them know that you're having an allergic reaction because that's what you're having. Cortisone cream is not a bad idea, but we want to make sure we get all the excess resin off of your skin if you haven't done that already. I understand that it's not always possible to be 100% safe. And while we are working on lab coats, yes, that are gonna say resin is toxic. If you're part of our Patreon Discord, you'll have seen these because we've actually been working on them live in the Discord for everybody to take a look at. If you do want to join, links are in that description down below. $10 tier or higher gets you access to that Discord. I hope you get well soon. This is not fun. I thankfully take reasonably good precautions, and while every now and then I get a little bit of resin on my skin or a splash happens from one of our cleaning vats, we do a good job at making sure that we contain the issue and we get it cleaned off quickly. We actually keep alcohol handy to immediately get rid of any resin that gets on skin because 100% protection is just not possible. You know, sometimes you make mistakes. I want you guys to be safe. We say it right in the end credits. I want you to be safe. So please wear protection when dealing with resin. Hell, honestly, if you have to question, should I have PPE for this? The answer is yes. And why don't you? Oh, Facebook groups. Facebook groups. You know, Mad Cat USA sent this to us, and I was tempted to not deal with it because I don't like Facebook groups. And then I saw the comments and said, yep, We gotta cover it. Hi all, so I'm doing this big print and the pieces are looking incredible. But when I remove the supports, tree or regular supports, it's the same with both. The bottom side just looks horrible. Any ideas of how I can resolve this or tips to make it look better? Printed on an Ender 3 S1 Pro. It's a very interesting color. Is that like a mint marble? I kind of dig that color. So we can see the top side looks great. I mean, honestly, that's a great looking print. Maybe a little bit over extruded, but like overall, great print. Bottom side looks like dog water. I hate that. Let's see what the comments have to say, because the comments are always where we come for proper things from the internet. Poorly leveled bed. No, it's not that. While I think this is touching the bed, they're not close enough to the bed. Poorly leveled is not the answer. To be clear, this comes down to your support interface layers. For a part like this, if you really want it to come out right, honestly, I would cut the part right there. I would cut it right on this plane, print this piece separately, and bond it on. It looks like there is some sort of a roller in here, and I don't know if the roller actually works. If it is just for show and not for go, cutting the part will alleviate this issue. We can see that you are too far away from your build plate, so we can start there. We actually covered Z offset in a previous video. We'll card to it so you can take a look if that's something that you're looking for. This could be a bed level thing, but because it is such a small contact patch with the build plate, I'm gonna say it's not bed level, at least not this particular case. This is all about support interface, and if you don't have proper cooling, support interface can be just a nightmare. I hate it as much as the next person, but you really do have to dial in to where your supports don't weld to the part, but come really close to welding to the part if you don't want to cut this thing into pieces. I'd cut the freaking thing into pieces and not even bother with it, because honestly, the rest of the print looks pretty good. Looks like you got your printer reasonably well dialed. Let's look at tuning in that support distance. There are settings to do support interface layers. We like to have those at 3 or 4, which is normally more than is needed, but I'd rather have too much than not enough, because failures like this waste a lot of time. The material's not that big of a deal. The time is really the big deal. Generally, this is assuming you've got good cooling. 0.12 millimeter for your interface, for how much distance there is between your part and your supports, tends to lead to pretty good results. Sean here has it right. He said you can get better results by tweaking your support interface, design or find a small test print with an overhang that you can quickly print to test changes in your supports. However, I don't think you will ever get a support side surface to look anywhere near as good as the top surface with an FDM printer. Not with an Ender FDM printer. You can look at printers that can utilize soluble support and get beautiful top and bottom layers, but if you're looking at printers that expensive, you're not too worried about the cost of an Ender, because your spools cost more than the cost of an Ender. And Bambu update. It's palms are sweaty, knees are weak, and it's making big old plates of mom's spaghetti. This, I'm not entirely certain, is the Bambu's fault. This is a material that I've been testing, and that's about as much as I can talk about it. It is not like a material that you've seen, and it smells like vomit. For those of you that know about materials, you'll now know what it's made out of. It has been a nightmare. The material just acts like it's wet constantly when it's not, but it has carbon fiber in it, so I've been running it through my Bambu, through every one of the AMS slots to try and clean up the AMS or somewhere in the motion system for the Bambu. I am still having AMS failure issues, and I'm not exactly certain why. In fact, in a previous time lapse where we did a flexible skull container from Clock Spring, it failed 4 separate times to feed in silk filament. It's not that difficult. So I'm still dealing with these issues. So I'm running carbon fiber through it. It did make this spaghetti, which is interesting because it printed the exact same G-code fine 2 other times. The 3rd try, it did this. So at least AMS number 3 is probably fine. There is a good part under there for like 5 or 6 millimeters, but then it just decided to F off. Here's a time lapse of it if you guys are curious to see what happened. It wasn't fun, but at least the cleanup's not too bad. And yes, the bottom of my Bambu is dirty. I'm leaving all the failed prints down there that have ended up down there. You'll see why next week. Next week is my 6th month with the Bambu Lab X1 Carbon. We are running north of 0% success rate, so that's good, I guess. But we're not into the double digits yet, so that's cool. It's not fun, but to hear everything that I've got to say about it, you're gonna have to get subscribed and see the video that comes out Wednesday of next week, where I talk all about my experiences and some of the good. There's a lot more bad to talk about, and what I believe could use some fixing on the machine and on the company. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video and my meager attempts to give you updates with my Bambu throughout all of this. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. Wear your damn PPE. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Water's technically toxic in enough amounts too, so I don't know. 1v1 me? Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. And a massive thank you goes out to all of our channel supporters whose names are listed right next to me at the $5 tier and higher. Remember, if you want to support the efforts that we do here, you can do so at the links in the description down below. Right below me will be the entire PrintFixFriday series, now 95 episodes deep, coming on that big triple-digit number. Right, so that will be my look at the trends for the consumer-grade 3D printing industry. If you like FDM and resin 3D printing, I think you'll like it, although really only covered FDM in that one. Maybe we gotta do a resin one. I'll see you guys down in those comments and the next one. Take care.